Morning and welcome to the ODPP Café. My name is Anita Onuko. I'm your host for the show. The show is brought to you courtesy of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. We aim to educate, we aim to inform and engage you on matters concerning the law. We say whether you're in contact or in conflict with the law, when you watch this show and engage with us, you get to understand what to do, or you can even advise someone if they're in trouble or they need to understand something about the law. So karibu sana to the show. We are on Facebook at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Kenya. We welcome you to follow us and engage with us on the show. You can ask a question, you can seek clarification, and we'll strive our best to respond to your queries or your concerns. We are also on YouTube Live at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Kenya, and we are on Twitter at ODPP_KE. I invite you to subscribe, invite a friend to follow us, to subscribe, and let us learn together. This is the 62nd episode, if that is right. We've been talking a lot about the law, what happens, what it says, and most of the people who watch this show are actually, they're informed now, they're better. I'm also a better person because of this show. So today we are going to talk about the girl child. You want to celebrate the girl child. So October 11th was the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the International Day of the Girl Child. So I have guests on studio who are going to just tell us progress, the challenges, the successes, and of course what the future holds for the girl child. And just as a disclaimer, we will not forget to talk about the boy child because Ondimu is here. But as always, before we start the show, I'm going to take you through just a few highlights of the courts. It's been quite a busy week. Last week or this week, it's been very busy. So I'm just going to give you just a few highlights of the courts. And of course, like we say, it's not exhaustive, just some of those things you may have missed. Because, you know, nowadays everything runs so quickly on social, you get caught up quite quickly. So I'll start with the first highlight from the courts. And it's about Gladys Chania. She's been trending a lot. So she is going to be held a little longer. Kiambu politician Gladys Chania has been detained for 7 days to allow for conclusion of investigations into the murder of her husband, Mr. George Mwangi. Ms. Chania and her alleged accomplice, Maurice Mbugua, have been in custody since last week, Friday, after police linked them to the killing of George Mwangi, 58-year-old George Mwangi, who had been reported missing. His body, which was wrapped in a polythene bag, was found in Kieni Forest, Gatundu North, I think the week before that. The prosecution, led by Evelyn Onunga, a senior principal prosecution counsel from the ODPP, asked the court to detain the two for 14 days, adding that the matter is complex and the investigators need more time. Kiambu senior magistrate Wilson Rading ruled that the suspects should be detained for 7 days and not 14 as was requested. So the case will be mentioned again on 24th of October for further directions. I bet you've seen that case really making headline on social and of course on our news. The other story is about a senior retired foreign affairs officer. A Milimani court has charged Rose Jelagat Boit, a senior and retired foreign affairs officer, for allegedly conspiring to defraud businessman Rashid Abdul Sharifou of 0.2 hectares of land worth 40 million located in Karen, Nairobi. Ms. Boit was also charged with 2 other counts of uttering forged allotment letter and uttering a false receipt dated 14th October 2020 for 82,390 to Police Inspector Samson Lengopito, purporting to be genuinely issued by the Ministry of Lands at Ardhi House. The accused, who appeared before Magistrate Wendy Kagendo, pleaded not guilty to all 5 counts and was released on 1 million bond with 2 sureties of similar amount with an alternative of 300K cash bail. The case will come up for mention on 31st October 2022. And the last one we look at today is about Ida Odinga's bodyguard. Again, it also made quite the news on both social and traditional media. So the suspect in the murder of Ida Odinga's bodyguard, Barack Oduor Onyango, will be detained for 14 days pending the completion of investigations. Mr. Collins Okundi, who appeared before Kisumu Senior Resident Magistrate Stella Telewa, was arrested on Sunday after surrendering at a police station in Eldoret. Again, I bet you've seen this in the news. Explaining the request to detain the suspect, Prosecutor John Oyimbo told the court that the suspect had fled the crime scene and was a flight risk. Prosecutor Mina Opio also argued that the suspect would interfere with investigations if he was released on bail. The case will be mentioned on 11th November 2022. So I want to just stop there from the updates from the courts because, like I said, I know you're all caught up and we don't want to repeat a lot of what has been running through the media, just trying to tell you some of those things that you may have missed. And I want to bring us back to the show. Like I said, we are talking about the International Day of the Girl Child. It was marked on 11th of October, and this year was the 10th anniversary. And like I said, I have been joined by two experts, of course, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves. And they can tell us, let us know what the progress is, where we've come from, where we are going. So I'll start with the lady. Thank you so much, Judy, for coming to the show.
Thanks, Anita.
Karibu sana, introduce yourself and tell us a bit about Equality Now.
Hi, I am Judy Gitau. I work with Equality Now as its regional coordinator for the Africa region. Equality Now is an international women's rights organization that's been in Kenya for more than 25 years.
25?
Yes, and we work on the rights of women and girls. Specifically, we work on ending sexual violence, ending harmful practices, that's, FGM, child marriage, legal equality. So if there's inequality in law, we'll be there to challenge it. And finally, ending sexual exploitation. So we are what we call a legal advocacy organization. We use the law to champion the rights of women and girls in the country.
Oh, good. I use communication to champion the law.
This is true.
Karibu sana to the show.
Asante.
Yeah. Mr. Ondimu, karibu and introduce yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Duncan Ondimu. I'm currently Senior Principal Prosecution Counsel based at the Narok County office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Karibu to the show. Like I told you, round one.
Yeah.
Round two is coming.
Appearance.
Maiden appearance. Yeah, so I picked something from the UNICEF website. It says that up to 10 million girls, this is just this year, will be at risk of child marriage. The profound effects of COVID again were being felt and girls were put at a higher risk. And of course, early marriage due to the combination of economic shocks, school closures and interruptions in productive health services. That's again a COVID effect. And then almost half of the primary schools in least developed countries lack single-sex toilets. I didn't even know that was an issue until I read this. Apparently, it's an important factor in girls' attendance to school. And then more than 2/3 are without electricity. So girls are primarily victims of sexual exploitation. So these are quite grim statistics. And maybe we need to start by giving a difference, or rather the distinction between gender equality and gender equity. What is the difference?
So when we talk about gender equality, what we mean is where everybody is treated in the same way. So if it's about resources, for example, or opportunities, everybody is given the same resources, the same opportunities. But whenever we talk about gender equity, is we recognize that everyone is coming from a different space. So for example, in this instance, a girl and a boy from the same home have very different realities. The boy will have to wake up and go to school. The girl, because of social cultures and so on, will be expected to clean, to sort out her family, to cook before she goes to school. And then also because of culture, the family would rather prefer the boy to go to school than the girl. And so there's need for more encouragement. So the opportunity to go to school, perhaps by the government, is that education is free, for example, at primary school level. But the realities are that whereas the boy will be able to attend school, there perhaps needs to be an interaction with the family to let them know the value of the girl coming to school. So when we talk about equity, that extra step to engage with the family so that we bring everybody onto the same platform so that everybody can access. Maybe just to add, I don't know if anybody has ever seen this image of 4 children trying to see a football match across the fence, and the children are of different height. So equality is actually putting a bench, a straight bench, so that everybody stands on it. So the tall kid standing on a bench will be head and shoulders. In fact, it'll be at waist length above, looking across the fence. The very short kid won't even be able to see across the fence, and then the middle level kid will be, peeking a little bit above the fence. So equality is that a straight bench. Equity is allowing this kid who's tall already just to stand and see across her face the fence, and then the very short kid would get a longer stamp, so that everybody then stands at the same level.
Is that what you're trying to achieve with the girl child?
Oh, absolutely. So basically, when people discuss the girl child, what they mean is that we're coming a long way off. Everybody is starting indeed from the same starting line, but along the way there's so many hurdles for the girl child. You just talked about so many hurdles when you're talking about the UNICEF report. So child marriage is one of them. FGM is one of them, with statistics such as 21% prevalence rates in this country, and it goes much higher in certain areas. I learned last week that in Kiambu, statistics are now rising at an alarming rate. FGM, which is horrific. We have it in Northeastern, of course. We also have it here in Nairobi because it's a cosmopolitan. We have challenges such as the fact that it's being medicalized now. And so girls being cut transitions into child marriage, because then someone assumes that this girl is ready to get married. That means she doesn't have education. That means being married as a child to an older person, she's going to be sexually violated because she's having someone who's an adult acting as the husband and constantly engaging in sexual conduct with her throughout. And so these are the things that are the hurdles which need to be taken out for there to be equality. So it's the equity process that results in equality for the girl.
Oh, okay. Odimu, we talk about the girl child a lot. Does it mean we forget the boy child?
Not really, because when you look at what Judy has talked about and equity, because equity breeds equality. So we start from ensuring that fairness, giving everyone an equal opportunity. And of course, even if you give everyone equal opportunity, there are some, let's say the boy child has had since time immemorial, has had a head start. So how do you ensure that everybody is in the same team? And that's why it's not like you're forgetting the boy child. It's just putting an emphasis that this person has always been disadvantaged. How do we bring her up to speed?
Okay. So when you talk about FGM, Narok also comes to the discussion table. How is it in Narok?
FGM is quite a serious problem. At the moment, we have over 29 active FGM cases that are ongoing.
29?
29 active, over 29 that are actually ongoing. I think it's the highest number in court statistics, the active cases that are ongoing. But we have a problem with reporting. Most of the cases are not being reported. Through the county offices, the county commissioner office, we've realized that the villages, it's no longer a problem in the villages. It's been, the chiefs have really been active. The problem now in Narok is the urban center within the Narok county. It's like no longer the villages. Well, right? Because the villages, there's a lot of surveillance, the Nyumba Kumi and all that, there's a lot. But in urban centers, when we engage with the FGM board, we realize that they've never done any sensitization in an urban, because it has always been seen the problem is in the villages. As Judy has mentioned, the medicalization, it's a big problem, because now it's being done to very small children. You can't realize, because there are like about 2 or 3 cases towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, that a child was defiled. That's when the doctor is attending to the defilement, realized that FGM had been performed. So it's a big problem.
So what happens in such a case? The parents are called in?
Now the problem with one of the cases, when it was realized that the child had FGM had been conducted, and the doctor is dealing with the defilement issue, it put us at a crossroad. Do we charge this parent who is now complaining about defilement, which is really, what do we do? So we opted, let's first deal with the defilement, get every statement ready, then we decide later on whether we'll pursue the parents for the FGM. So it's usually a very tricky situation.
Okay. Something about the FGM board. They had a plan to end FGM by 2022. We are here now. What can we say of this year and those aspirations?
I think the aspirations were critical. In fact, they were important. The truth of the matter is, for anything of that nature to come to an end, we need for the government to prioritize it and ensure that we've got political goodwill from the top to the bottom. So when the president did declare that we were going to end FGM this year, the former president that is, it allowed different actors to align themselves to the cause. FGM being a cultural and a harmful cultural practice has meant that despite the existence of the Prohibition of Female Genital Mutilation Act, in short the Anti-FGM Act, despite the law being in place, people still continue to practice it, assuming that because it's a cultural practice, it can't possibly be that harmful. Again, because it's a practice that is shrouded in secrecy or nobody quite knows the details of it, many people want to assume this is the culture that is practiced by those people over there. I'm not really, informed or know about it, so could it really be, it's their problem, let them deal with it. So for it to get national attention and presidential attention, it aligned different actors, and this is how. The presidential declaration resulted in the establishment of a multi-agency technical committee that brought together people such as Duncan, who was prosecutors, came on board, but critically different ministries, because it involves different ministries. It's not just about investigation and prosecution. Ministry of Health needed to come in, because not just because of medicalization, but when someone has been cut, they need medical attention, or if someone is to be taken to court, there needs to be medical examination. It also needed Ministry of Interior, because we needed everybody from the chief moving on up. If we needed Ministry of Education, when a girl is being cut, she misses school. The teacher will be the first one to notice, and so on and so forth.
So many actors.
Everybody, all the different actors in a multi-sectoral approach came together and were meeting every quarter to begin to mark the progress onto this. So a lot of progress has been made. The Anti-FGM Board has done a bit of sensitization across the country, but it would be a lie to say that it has ended. You're hearing that there's 29 cases going on. It just gave impetus to a much needed process. It allowed national attention to a much needed issue. And so there's progress, there's reduced numbers, but in some areas there's increased numbers, and there's reawakening of this as a harmful practice. But just to throw in this for good measure, whenever we talk about FGM, I think we need to look at three distinct ways in which it is harmful. First, of course, it's in the physical aggravation of it. If it's just that we don't see it, but if someone was to cut your arm, or someone was to cut your nose, we would have to contend with that. As a community, we'd have to ask questions about that. And it is that. It's without, in most instances, anesthesia or whatever, someone cutting a critical part of your body and hacking it off for no reason, and causing harm. And so there's the immediate aggression, the pain, the physical impact of it that people who are cut undergo, and people bleed out. People become anemic. It's really a problem. The second is the long-term effects or impacts of this. People who then go ahead to develop scars, keloids, etc., and have difficulty up to and including childbirth, resulting in fistula, resulting in death, and all of that. But then the third part that people don't contend with is the reason as to why women are cut. It's informed by a perspective that women are less. Women should be controlled. Women should be put in their place, because it's the thinking behind it. Because if you think about it, who else within the society, and this is particularly negative because we're talking about the child, who else within the society do we make decisions for in such a manner that we sit around as a society and decide about what should be done to you, what should be cut from you, because you need to be in a certain way. You need not enjoy your sexual rights, but critically we determine everything around your private space. Who else except that the society believes that is your position, and so it comes from that thinking, really. And so these three things come together to fashion a violence, or actually a gender-based violence against the woman, against the girl, and to think that it's being done to children younger and younger, and ushering them into practices such as child marriage and sexual violence, as has already been evidenced by Ondimo.
So Ondimo, I'm wondering, what makes urban centers now the hub for these things? Because it looks like the assumption was they're educated, they're more informed, they're exposed. But what makes an educated parent in an urban center make their child undergo FGM?
It is, from my experience, the last 1.5 years that I've been in Narok, the problem is actually not the uneducated in Narok, what I've noticed. The problem is actually the educated, who are well aware of the dangers, but they tend to think that it's their culture. And there's this aspect of localization of medical staff. So you find, like, for example, in Narok, for you to be hired by the county government, chances are high you are
You come from Narok.
Narok area. So you've grown up knowing.
Is that like
so
policy or?
Generally, county government hire their local
right.
staff first before they go externally. So find most of these medical staff, the nurses and what, they're local. So they will not, even it's in rare cases, even the case that I've mentioned that was reported, it was not a person, the medical professional was not from the local community. That's why he was able to report the incidents. One of the, we had recently, just before the election, you must have read it in the papers, where a girl called their head prefect, the prefect informed the mom now called back the police in Narok, and the whole issue was followed up.
That she was going to undergo FGM?
Yes, they were all well-educated parents, but only to realize the father had no idea. The entire thing was being organized by the mother and the aunt.
Oh.
The father had no idea what was going on. It's not that they're not educated, there are people within the urban center.
Yeah.
So
the way you say they live amongst us.
They live amongst us. So it's because whenever there's a gathering, for example, in Narok, the chief has to know in the villages. But you see, in an urban center, you will not know. Because it's more of a ceremony and the rest, you will not know. So that's why I'm foreseeing the problem is basically the urban, the people you expected who are educated.
Yeah.
The last engagement we had with the board, we agreed that they need now to center, especially for speaking about Narok, they need to center more sensitization within the urban. Because the villages, they've sort of become aware.
They're aware
of what,
now.
yes.
Yeah.
And also, in addition to what Judy has said about choices, I never thought it was such a serious problem until when you meet some of these victims who've undergone and they explain to you their experiences. It's really, to say the least, it's really, really nasty. It's something which I don't know what people can be made to understand. There's a time you hosted one of the victims, sometimes back in one of the episodes.
Sadia.
Yeah, if you'd listen to her, I don't think anyone would allow such a practice to happen.
Okay. So then, what makes FGM and SGBV a sexual gender-based violence?
The fact that FGM is performed in one's reproductive health area to start with, the fact that it is informed by patriarchy and misogyny, an intention to subjugate the woman or to put her in a particular place. When we talk about sexual and gender-based violence, this is violence which is meted upon somebody, presumably because of their gender. And when we understand gender to mean not sex, but the perceived role that one should have in the society because of their sex. So as a woman, I shouldn't be loud. As a woman, I should be, demure, carry myself well. As a man, whenever we say certain terminology, we assume it's a man. The person is strong, everybody assumes it's a man. The person is a leader, we assume it's a man.
Or boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. These are the kinds of things. And so this is violence. FGM is violence. What Ondimu is saying is true, that if you actually come face to face with it, and there's a certain, in some of our engagements as an institution, we were working together with judges and magistrates, and we were building the capacity to understand what it is. It's because when you're faced with a survivor on the dock in court, that survivor is clean, is sanitized, victim or survivor, is clean, is sanitized, she looks good. And so you don't quite grasp the ordeal, that the violence that has been meted on that person. And one of the judges, unfortunately, found a UNICEF video documentary that actually documented the actual act. I'm not even sure how that was captured, but projected it. Suffice to say that it visited secondary trauma on everybody in the room. You cannot watch that and walk away the same. And it was a 6-year-old, I was in the room, it was a 6-year-old girl. There was no anesthesia used, and it was brutal. It was brutal. And that violence being meted on somebody for the purposes of ensuring that they remain in their role as a girl, as a woman, amounts to sexual and gender-based violence.
Okay.
And so it's a type. I mean, there's other types of SGBV. When we talk about rape, when we talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault, defilement, and so on, and this is right up there with them. It's a form of gender-based violence. Yeah.
Okay, so we look at how FGM has affected the girl child, and maybe there's hope because a lot of sensitization is going on, and political will, we should say it's there, at least. So the other issue that faces the girl child is child labor. I mean, how...
Maybe before you move from that, I need to point out, if you would realize the engagement you had with the board last year in Naivasha, I think there was equality.
Yes.
Luckily, the then board chairman is now a member of parliament. We hope with the upcoming, there's need to amend the act.
Okay.
There has been discussions pursuant to the Machakos petition, Dr. Tatu petition. So there's need to amend the act. There has been discussion going on. And we hope, now that she's a member of parliament, representing a constituency affected by FGM,
Who is that?
she will do something.
Agnes Perillo.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Agnes
She's
Perillo.
now, okay.
Yes, she was a chairperson of the board, and now she's a member of parliament, hoping to champion that. She herself has come out, as a champion of fighting FGM, coming from a history of being violated herself, and so being able to speak with authority on that as an issue. Yes, so we're hoping for change. There is, but not to forget what it is he said, that we've got a move by people, I suppose, because as a society we are looking for meaning and purpose, and everybody is. So there's a move towards culture, and sometimes the wrong culture. I say that because he's talked about the Tatu Kamau case, which we were part of as an institution, where we had a medical doctor file a case in court to challenge the constitutionality of the Anti-FGM Act, which was a shock, because she said in her arguments that we have a right to culture. And so the question becomes, what culture? Because culture is dynamic, and culture should be informed by our lived realities. And so we're happy that her application was thrown out, and whereas indeed the Anti-FGM board, the Anti-FGM Act needs to be strengthened. We're happy that the Act exists to actually deter the practice, and has been so really from 2011 to now. This is it.
All right. So child labor, the girl child is equally exposed. So what are these issues we see, and what is the future?
With regard to child labor, let me just start in saying statistically across the world we see numbers such as 160 million children who are being exploited for purposes of labor for gain, which is what child labor is, just exploitation of a child through work for economic gain. And so we see such numbers, and the numbers rose to about 160 million globally because of COVID. The drivers of things such as child labor, I mean, usually it's just, we would say it's bad manners, but mostly it includes the fact that if the breadwinner in the house loses their job, and so everybody is trying to seek or to eke a living. And so when we talk about COVID, these circumstances were exacerbated. Many people lost meaningful gains of employment, and so you try and get everybody in the house to get something, to bring something onto the table. We also know, because of lack of social protection nets within a society, again, this exacerbates the situation, and we find kids engaging in that. To speak about Kenya specifically, I would say I'm trying to remember the number, translated to about 1.8 million children are actually exposed. And this speaks to things such as farm work. We also find mining in the communities that have some excavation, where you see those shifts and mines. I don't know. I mean, early in the year, there's this child who was trapped in Western Kenya, trying to get the alluvial from under the ground. We also see that happening. And then for girls, we mostly see them in domestic work, where they're trafficked for purposes of that in urban areas, but I have to hinge this. We can never get away from, unfortunately, sexual violence, because as they're being trafficked, they're also being sexually exploited.
They're quite exposed
as they're trafficked into different households for that purpose, to work in homes, people who hire children, people who are under the age of 18 to take care of their own children. And you wonder how that is even, something that you can do, but it does happen. People hire children to serve as domestic workers in their own homes, and so this is what we're seeing in terms of numbers and statistics and how children are being exploited. To clarify though, when a child is being exploited for purposes of work, when you're asking your own child to do domestic work, that does not amount to...
Oh, it doesn't?
No, it doesn't. When domestic work at home and chores that you encourage your children to do, it doesn't amount to that. And there's a few other exceptions when you're sort of building skills of a child, through TVETs and so on.
But they look as though they are undergoing so much.
No. I mean, they're just capacitating your children and teaching them responsibility. We see it as exploitation when it results in them being denied their childhood, when children are not allowed to go to school, for example, so that they can do this particular chore for economic gain. When we see the children being, as I said, exploited sexually, which of course just destroys the children at their core. It literally denies them their childhood on account of economic gain. That is a measure for one to see whether or not it's child labor or child exploitation.
All right. I just remembered something when my son told me yesterday, that they were taught the rights of the children, and one of the rights was the right to a good name. What is that about?
I mean, just maybe before I attempt to respond to that, as Judy has talked about exploitation, I was looking at the new Children's Act. It talks of the age of 13.
What about the age of 13? Like you can't...
Yeah. Below the age of 13, you can't employ that person.
But at 13 you can.
You cannot.
No,
It talks of, then there are other restrictions that the Act has imposed that Judy has mentioned. But also I need to mention the fact of the introduction of free primary education helped a lot in reducing, because children had to access to education. However, with this new academic system of CBC, it's become expensive for some parents. So you find some kids are not able to go to school and not able to get some of these equipments.
So they sort of just decide not to go to school. And I think it's not even, I keep saying that CBC, thank God there's a task force and there's political will to relook, because of the inequalities it is now breeding. Because children up country in the rural areas are not able, or even here in Nairobi.
So it pushes them to engage in employment.
Just to work, because even here in Nairobi, everyday printing a paper for your child was to do.
Yes, but
it's expensive.
You see, this is what we're talking about, lack of social safety nets. There actually needs to be a level of, for example, resources allocated to families of a certain level, so that they're able to engage meaningfully with the existing opportunities. Back to our original discussion, the opportunity to go to school is there for everybody, but then you need to ensure everybody is able to exploit those opportunities. Not all of us are, and so there's need to put that different variation in terms of the bench, so that somebody is able to actually access education and not wind up somewhere as a domestic worker and being exploited and being violated.
Okay. So do you get cases of child labor in Narok, for example?
No, we only got one. So far, for the last 1.5 years, we got one, but we realized that he was actually around 15, 16. He had, the boy had run away from home, and when he ran away from home, because of the conditions that were at home, he wasn't going to school. He had not attended school for quite a while, for several years, not even months. So the parents sort of kicked him out. So he had to try and do something. So he had been employed to look after cattle.
So when we look at children and the law, plea bargain, diversion, and all this, how do they work? What is considered?
Any person, when you look at the diversion policy guideline that the office launched, it encourages diversion in all the cases involving minors. It does encourage, so you don't have to take the child in conflict with the law through the court processes. You can divert. Either you contact the children officer, like for example in Narok, we are really using the children officer in diversion cases. But for now, what we've decided in Narok, we are not going to do diversion until we examine all the cases closely involving sexual offences because of the grim statistics that we are having at the moment. So we've decided for the next about a month or two, we are sort of suspending for sexual offences only. Because of the numbers that we have so far, we have about 741 girls underage who are pregnant.
Oh no.
300 and something are in primary school, and the rest 400 are in high school. Majority are candidates for this year.
Oh Lord.
According to MOH, says the people who are attending prenatal clinic
Children.
are around 900 children below the age of 18.
What is that?
That is from the Ministry of
Health.
And so with all those statistics, we are not sure whether it's teachers, whether it's fellow students, or whether it's villagers. So if, as a county, we had a county security meeting.
Your statistics
this
are
week.
shocking.
We had a meeting this week.
Yeah.
So we agreed we are going to have an RRI for the next 1 month to just deal
What's an
with this
RRI?
rapid
Rapid response initiative.
initiative, yes.
Yeah.
To just address these sexual offences. These are defilement cases, majority,
Those
yes.
are many.
It's really serious, and we've already, we are expecting the investigations have started. So we've agreed that all the principals where they are pregnant underage girls, they have to record, their respective class teachers have to record statement. When did they realize this? Because what we are questioning the Ministry of Education is that you've been having these statistics. We're only learning of them like a week ago.
Yeah.
What have you been doing? How comes you never reported to the police? How comes you never informed? Because these are not cases that have been reported. Because the cases that we've had within Narok, we've registered around 29 defilement cases fresh this year. In Kilgore is the same number, so those are like about 65.
Yeah.
So 60 compared to 741.
Yeah.
So it means that around 800 girls out there, their cases have not been addressed. So we are having, it's a joint effort, the Ministry of Education, Health, the County Commissioner, the County Commander, the CCIO. It's what we are going to be doing for the next 1 month. So that's why we are not willing to divert these cases at the moment until we find out, is it their fellow
So in this
children?
case, diversion is for who?
If I may,
Yeah.
if I may jump
Yeah.
in, first just to clarify what diversion is, and then to
Yeah.
why in such an instance, and then I'll let Ondine
Yeah.
do his thing. Whenever we have children who are either in conflict with the law or have an altercation with the law, it is important to divert them or use alternative means to which we can address the issue, unless the alleged, and for children it's not not a crime as such, unless the alleged offense is of such a grievous nature that there must be accountability for it through a court process. So it's an attempt at rehabilitating the child and getting them back in the understanding that they were a child and they were engaging in a mistake of sorts. A lot of our laws have a gap, but the ODPP's office has actually provided a response for it, a gap in this particular issue. That when we have children who are having consensual sexual relationships with each other, as sometimes minors do, for example, a 16-year-old boy having a relationship with his 15-year-old girlfriend, and then the girlfriend winds up pregnant. Statutorily by law, if someone has sex with somebody below the age of 18, it amounts to statutory rape, which would be defilement in this instance. And so that 16-year-old boy who has had a sexual relation with his 15-year-old girlfriend is at risk of going in for up to 15 years on account of that, right? And so yet, for all of us to see in such an encounter, you'd find that the 16-year-old boy is actually having a consensual relationship with a 15-year-old, and such a case perhaps should not have reached that level. It's a case that would have been diverted and the issue addressed appropriately. But in our laws, our Sexual Offences Act do not have a provision that would be referred to as a Romeo and Juliet clause. Our laws do not have a provision that provides for that sort of, safety net. So the ODPP developed guidelines on how to engage with such cases, because they make the decision on whether to prosecute or not to prosecute. And so before bringing the matter to that level, meaning that the judge or the magistrate's hands are tied and they have got to make a decision on that case based on the law the way it is, that case would have already been handled at the level of ODPP. But what I'm hearing Ondim was saying, therefore, is that when you have 700 and something girls who are pregnant, it's important not to make the assumption that all of them are from consensual sexual relationships. It's important to actually investigate, and as they're doing, to establish exactly what are the circumstances under which these girls got pregnant. But while we're there, the controversial issue at play now is one where we have that the judges have made decisions at the High Court level and now at the Court of Appeal level, where they're now finding that the mandatory, what we're calling mandatory minimum sentences, the sentences that say if you defile a girl between the ages of 0 and 10, then you go away for 25 to life. And if you defile a girl between the ages of 10 and 15, it's graduated. Judges are saying they do not want that. They want to make their own decisions as to how many years one goes in. And so that is now the controversy that is brewing in the legal space as we're speaking.
Actually, Judy has really explained diversion properly in a very, not a legalistic way, but very, very common to everybody
to understand.
Yes, it's actually a very good guideline. It has given prosecutors a latitude to exercise their discretion, because you've met the evidential test. But now, when you look at the public interest test, you're wondering, do I take this kid through the whole process, through the entire justice system? Will it make him better, or will he come out worse? That's where the diversion is. She has explained diversion comes in here.
Okay, it's good you mentioned the test, the evidentiary test and all that. There's that threshold thing that you keep hearing about nowadays. What is that about?
Threshold is, when it comes to threshold test, it's where that there's a prospect for you to get more evidence as investigation proceeds. There's a prospect. There is prima facie, sort of, but you need more. There are certain areas that you need to be fulfilled, to be covered.
Prima facie is who?
I don't know how to...
Let me try, because he's speaking court jargon, so let me try.
Please try.
Prima facie basically means on the face of it. Without anyone questioning, if I look at this matter, if like I told you, when I'm looking at the matter before you defend yourself, when I look at it, I can tell that you've committed the offense. So before additional evidence, before we argue, before we put the question, we know that you are in this room, the girl who was defiled was in this room, there was no other person who was in the room. So looking at the evidence on the face of it, it shows that you did it. But then when now it's brought to court, the other factors are brought in to prove if what we are looking at it on the face of it meets the standard or meets the threshold. So it could be that there's a window, so someone came in through the window, and so your defense counsel would have to establish that there was a window and someone else came in. It could be that whereas it was only the two of you in the room, the forensic evidence shows that the specimen that was collected is not yours, and so on and so forth. But when we talk about prima facie, it's basically on the face of it. But to quickly just put an addition to what it is he said. For sexual offences, for rape, let me not even beat about the bush and just go down to it. For offences such as rape, the key ingredient to determining the matter is whether or not there was consent, right? If somebody consented to the act, and so we need therefore to define what that consent is, and it comes into two spectra, if I may put it that way. Consent, if you're a minor, if you're a child, you do not have capacity to consent. Put simply, would you enter into a contract with a child?
No.
Do they even have the capacity to back it up? They can't. And so if the person is a minor child, then they cannot consent. If a person doesn't have the mental capacity, if someone has is not sound mentally, they do not have capacity to consent. Then we also have situations where if someone has been coerced, if somebody has been forced, if there's been threat of force, if there's pretense and so on, falsehoods that have come with it, then consent is lacking. So the threshold that needs to be met in that circumstance is for someone to prove that consent existed. And it can't really be that hard to prove. I mean, someone can't tell you there was consent and someone else saying there wasn't. That threshold of consent needs to be met. So each type of case has that standard which needs to be met to prove that this matter needs to come before the court and therefore establish that someone is guilty or not guilty. So in sexual offences matters, the threshold to be met is, was there or wasn't there consent? Was there a threat so that someone was forced to consent and so on? Yeah.
Okay, maybe also before we lose, you had asked the question, as that Judy had explained, and I had mentioned briefly, is that prosecutor is allowed to divert those matters. When it comes to plea bargain, for sexual offences, it's not allowed. You can't plea bargain in a sexual offence. But any other offence we can plea bargain, but for sexual offence, it's specifically. And that's why I think the diversion policy came in to guide, in cases, the Romeo and Juliet, mainly to cater for Romeo and Juliet cases. It gives a very good guideline to prosecutors on when to employ diversion and when should not when not to consider it. Yes.
So who survives in this Romeo and Juliet? Do they get punished, both of them? Do they get
no? The
restoration takes place for both of them.
Yes. The idea is to take them through counselling, to get them to take responsibility. If you're 17 and your girlfriend is 16 and so on, it's for you to be able to provide and ensure you feature in lives, so that you don't get any other girl pregnant on account of, I'm just in a relationship, or the girl doesn't also take this lightly. That's the idea around it, as opposed to criminalize it and make it into rape or make it into defilement as an issue. So that is what that looks like.
Okay. Do you allow for out of court settlements in these cases?
For which offences?
Like sexual offences?
No.
Especially against a child?
No. Because the problem is, if you do that, it opens a floodgate and it's bound to be misused. And I think when you look at when the Sexual Offences Act was being enacted, some of the concerns that were raised during the discussions by the MPs were these discussions that happen in the villages. Then you as a prosecutor unakuja unaambiwa that tumeelewana. That cannot, because for example, if it's against a minor, let's say the child is 12 or 10, how would they elewana on behalf of the child?
See, the mother says, I'm speaking for my daughter.
No. I mean, when the law, in fact, for criminal matters, the cases are R versus the person, the Republic versus the person. So you, as a child, have a right the way someone else as a grown-up has a right. Your parent can come in as an intermediary between you, the government, and the child. So you have a right. And so someone cannot purport to settle the matter on your behalf. It cannot be done that way. The idea here is the offense is so grievous or so heinous that there cannot be settlement for such an offense. There cannot. And what Ondimo was also saying, for example, with regards to the New Children's Act 2022 about 13, is that guilt for a child who's previously it was lower, the age of a child being able to comprehend the kind of offenses that they have done. So it was graduated upwards, because previously it was assumed that a child at a much younger age could comprehend the issues that they have done. But remember what it is, we were saying that it's for Romeo and Juliet clauses, strictly speaking, those are not criminal offenses. It's children experimenting, engaging, and so on. But where a child has actually engaged in something that is an offense, where a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old has brutally raped a minor, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, such child will be prosecuted. Although we under the children regime, we don't refer to that as prosecution, but that case would be handled akin to a criminal matter from beginning to the end.
Okay. So thanks, Luke Guides. Luke is on Facebook. He says, so wonderful. I think he likes the discussion. And then Jose Mborogo says, good morning, wonderful and informative show. Salamia, my friend Ondimo. And then, so Luke asks, in a case where a child under the age of 2 years, so I'm just reading because I haven't reviewed the question. I hope we can get to answer it. In a case where a child under the age of 2 years is alleged by her mother, don't know what that means, due to misunderstanding between her mother and father that she has been defiled or attempted to be defiled, and the doctor report shows that no defilement took place, what action do you take concerning that file? Do you go ahead and charge the father with indecent act, or you write a letter of insufficient evidence and release the suspect? You as ODPP. I think he's asking ODPP, when a mother goes to claim that the father has defiled a child because wamekosana, and then it is found later that there was no defilement, what happens?
See, for when you're looking at a file as a prosecutor, you have to be satisfied that there is evidence. You cannot charge where there is no evidence. You cannot charge. So it means that there is evidence, and when in cases where but there is a false reporting, there's a section under the Sexual Offences Act that makes it criminal. If you report and this offence never occurred, you are liable for. There are also other offences, like for example, giving false information to an officer employed in the public service. This means that you gave the police wrong information, and that was not a position.
Okay.
Because we cannot, there are certain instances for sexual offences, there are instances where such happens, especially when you find their neighbors, they're fighting over land, there are things that happen. So you have to really look at those circumstances to realize whether it's actually what happened.
Okay. So this is YouTube. Agatha Lango says, enjoying the conversation today morning. Charity, interesting. Thank you for tuning in. And then Joseph Kimanthi says, I'm stalking the central theme of today's topic has been thrusted. Well researched. Excellent job, Madam Judy and Bwana Ondimu. Anyway, so Eddie Kadebe, thanks Eddie for tuning in. He says, good morning. I'm totally enjoying the conversation. Can I pose 2 questions to the panelists? Of course you can. Is equalization a factor in consideration or use towards the attainment of equity? I promise you I don't know what he's asking. I hope you got it.
That's Judy's question.
All right. Can I ask it again?
Yes.
Is equalization a factor in consideration or use towards the attainment of equity?
Equity is a process. As we've said, equity is the process of realizing equality, so that it's where you recognize the variance. Equalization presupposes that the equality has been achieved. So the question being, is equalization a factor towards equality?
Yes.
It would be, I would say, in the other way around, that equity would be a consideration towards realizing equalization. So he's right, but he needs to place reverse it one after the other.
Okay, Eddie, I hope you got it. You need to reverse this. So equity is a factor in consideration towards equalization.
It is.
Kadebe, I hope you got it. I got it as well. So how does equalization ebb and flow so that we don't see gains being eroded?
Let me put it to him this way. When we talk about CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and Kenya has ratified and signed this instrument, and so it's a part of our local laws. It provides that the country or the government should put in place measures, but these measures are not permanent, to ensure we move towards equalization. So when we talk about things such as the 47 seats that we have for women, or we talk about quota system, where we put quotas that are reserved for women, or some of these things, these measures are not permanent. These measures are put there until such a time that we as a society reach where we feel there's equilibrium. And when that happens, then we can fade those off and allow the society to balance itself out. There can be a time when men find that they are, fewer in parliament. That's why the 2/3 gender rule is not 2/3 women rule. It's 2/3 gender. So when we reach a point where we find that there's 70 or this, for example, 99% of women in institutions, at that point, that rule needs to kick in and make sure we are equal. The concept behind it is that we have to have proper representation. The point behind it is that the different measures that we're making in terms of school and so on and so forth, if we find one gender is at an advantage over the other, then those measures are put in place. But just to guide, with CEDAW, as I've talked about, that particular provision is specific to women because it recognizes the history of women being left behind, and so needing for temporary measures to be put in place to let women come to an equal space.
Okay. Jacinta Nyamosi, thank you again for tuning in and the question. So she says, Anita, this is very interesting. Kindly discuss when the boy turns 18 but continues a relation with his girlfriend who's probably 17 yet to turn 18. Again, you're back to Romeo.
We are. And standard, and
No,
should I give it a try? Sorry, I'm particularly passionate about this because we're seeing the cases, and unfortunately we feel that decisions that are coming out are throwing out the baby in the bathwater. We are not the first country to deal with Romeo and Juliet clauses, and so borrowing from what other regions are doing, what other countries are doing or have done, is that Romeo and Juliet clauses consider a certain age group. So it would be put in the law if we amend our Sexual Offences Act. If we put that in the law, you find about 4 years or 3 years difference between parties. So you cannot, for example, have a 26-year-old man having sexual relations with a 17-year-old and being protected under the Romeo and Juliet clauses and say, I'm desperately in love with her. That would be rubbish. He would go in for statutory rape. You would have to have an age difference between the two parties that presupposes that the two parties are within a certain age group and one is not having power or influence or undue influence over another. You cannot have an 18-year-old with a 12-year-old. You can't. You cannot. So the idea is there needs to be an age difference whenever you're defining the people who can be within that age group. There needs to be a certain, age so that there's no influence, but at the same time, at any rate, not more than, for different countries, not more than 25 years, it says. So 24 below, and others say 21 below. Between that variance, and then now make it an age group that allows the parties to be able to have a clarity. Just to again indicate, there's a question that had been asked earlier about lying in a case. Section 35 of the Sexual Offences Act, though, was struck out. So we would have to rely on what Ondimu was referring to in terms of giving false evidence and so on. But that is if Ondimu decides to take the matter to court. As he said, it would be a matter that if he doesn't have sufficient evidence, he would not take it to court. But just to guide that Section 35 was struck out, and so we cannot prosecute you if you've made the alleged offense. It would have to be sieved at the point of Ondimu saying, I will not take this matter ahead because I do not have evidence.
Actually, maybe on the age difference, there's actually a decision by the Mombasa High Court Justice Ongijo where she explains that the age difference should be between 3 to 4, around that. That would be that would be taken. Yes. And to the question that my senior colleague Nyamosi has asked, what would happen when the boy, I will give an example of a case that we dealt with. It was sort of sad, a girl at the age of 16 got pregnant in Narok, gave birth when she was 16. The matter was reported to police, the mother reported to police, but the matter was never followed up. The responsible party disappeared. This girl had run away from school, came, left the child with the mother. The child clocked 1 year, so this girl was now around 17. Meets another man, informs the other man who is was it 19 or so? Meets another man, tells him I have a kid, they start a relationship. This man continues, a border raider, takes care of the kid, whenever the kid is sick, sends money, all that. The girl is still below age of 18. So the matter is, mother now reports that this guy is defiling my daughter. Still discloses he has another kid at home. So the question is, this is the guy who has been taking care of the kid. Do you prosecute that guy? Will you prosecute?
Yo.
Will you?
I don't think I will.
Thank you.
So, all right. So what happens when, I've just thought about Swalia Barabara, what happens when someone says, me when I saw the girl, she looked like she was 18.
Yeah, the Sexual Offences Act provides for that. So you'll be charged, but then that will be your defense. You'll say that she presented. But there needs to be reasonable grounds for you to believe that she's 18. And you saying she looks like it doesn't cut it. you needed to have taken some measures
steps,
to
What
ensure.
now? You ask for an ID?
You can.
Yeah.
And you should have. Because you see, if you've met somebody, and people know now, 17-year-olds sneak into clubs. So if you say, oh, I met her at the club, and so assume she was 18, doesn't cut it.
But Judy, she was in a club.
You need to take
Possibly drinking.
You need to take reasonable measures to ensure that whoever it is you are with is 18 and has capacity to consent. So the Act does provide that as a defense, but the Act does have a rider that you need to take reasonable measures. There needs to be sufficient evidence to show that you took reasonable measures to show that this girl is 18. So that if, for example, she, misguided, misdirected, pretended, provided a fake ID, etc., then possibly you could get off. But you simply saying she looked like it doesn't cut it.
Yeah. All right. Jacqueline Jaggi says, thanks, Jackie, for tuning in. Good morning. Very good interview. Good to see Judy on ODPP Café. Good partner to have in the sexual violence issues. That is Jacqueline Jaggi. And then Nancy Henshomayo says, good morning, informative show. And I think there's something here on YouTube. Carol Ngigi says, the justice system needs to draw in parents of children in conflict with the law into the justice system to enhance accountability and reduce reoffending. Do the speakers agree with this, and how?
The new Children's Act 2022 does make numerous provisions and protections for children in conflict with the law. And, as you said about the diversionary measures, those speak a lot to parents. But you see, sometimes children who are in conflict with the law, you'll find that the parents, and I'm hesitant to say this, some parents are derelict, and so would not necessarily be the parents that have been involved and engaged.
Yeah.
And so you involving them at this point sometimes might not necessarily work. But the new Children's Act does provide very many measures that take advantage of parents, of existing community structures, and so on and so forth.
You agree, Ondimu?
Judy has really explained it in detail.
Yeah.
And I think I have nothing else to do.
So Karangigi says again, and what's the relation between family strengthening and reduction of crimes involving and against children? Maybe you can take that, Ondimu.
What? Yes.
What's the relation between family strengthening and reduction of crimes involving and against children? Maybe the role of the family unit?
Because when you look at generally the family structure, the society, the family is the basic structure. The most basic where children are expected to grow. Yeah. Because the new act sort of emphasizes on not institutionalizing children, but growing up in a family sort of structure. So these are the people expected to guide and show the right path to these children as they grow up, before the entire society comes in.
Okay. And the family has come under attack, societal issues,
Well, yes. I mean, I think, like we said, the society is dynamic and changing, and focus has been on what's been happening now, the economic hardships. There's hardly time to be home. There's hardly time to be with family. Before you notice, either your child is in conflict with the law or your child is being violated. In the context, I mean, we've seen some horrendous cases fairly recently about, domestic workers and young children. And so let's just say, yes, the family is under attack, but from all sides, from all sides.
All right. So Jacinta Nyamosi says some jurisdictions allow for age of consent to be 16. The USA allows for this. What's your take?
There's a personal position, and then there's, generally societies determine for themselves what they feel is the age at which a child has capacity to consent. 16 is usually leaned on because even when we look at different treaties, global treaties, for example, Vienna Convention, which speaks, when we talk about conflict, Geneva Conventions on conflict, boys are recruited into military at 16. They will no longer be referred to as child soldiers if they're 16 and above. And so some communities then decide 16 is not a bad age at which we can, decide that you know what you're about, you know what you're thinking, and so on. So communities crystallize into law what they feel is the age at which somebody has capacity at 3 levels: physical capacity, but also intellectual capacity, and I dare say emotional, to take what the sexual relation will bring. If at 16 you get pregnant, will you handle it? Would you be able to negotiate, a safe sexual encounter? Would you be able to demand? Would you be able to say no? Would you, all of those? So as a country, we've decided 18 is that age. 18 is the age at which I feel, and for most people, it's because at 18 is when we're at the cusp finishing high school.
Yeah.
We know what we're about. We can make some level of decisions. We've got some level of clarity. So from community to community, do I think as a country, so it's not her question, but do I think as a country we should move to 16? No, not necessarily. Because even fairly recently, there was a 3-judge bench when they were faced with this Romeo and Juliet issue where 17-year-olds were having sex with 16-year-olds and so on. They said, maybe to solve this problem, let's lower the age of consent. No, because all one has to picture is that if you make 16 the age of consent, remember, a 45-year-old man will be able to have sex with a 16-year-old. Remember that. And remember the power play and the power dynamic and the influence that such a person can have over that girl to coerce them into that engagement, with us assuming that she can handle it, both the relation, the power dynamic, the pregnancy, the reproductive health and rights, diseases and so on. So, no, I think 18 is good for us. But again, it's a social decision that is crystallized into law to determine a minimum age for all of us.
Okay. So Karimi says, great conversations from Ondimu and Judy. Thanks, Karimi. And then Nyamosi says, Ondimu and Judy have done a splendid job. And she says, Anita, you've asked the right questions for this emotive topic. Burugu says, thank you all for the informative show. Issues have been broken down in a very simple manner, and we're now better informed. So an hour is gone, an hour plus.
Oh, wow.
But someone asked a question here, Carol Gigi. What's the one thing Kenya can do to end FGM as a parting shot?
I think there's not a single. It's a multi sort of, from everyone to do their part. If all of us do our part and we join efforts, then that will be able to eradicate. But one person cannot. It's a joint effort. Yes.
What's the one thing this country ought to do to end FGM?
Watch a video. Watch a video. I mean, I agree with Ondimu.
Yeah.
But I also think that we don't know how bad it is. I mean, if it's not being practiced in your community or you've never come face to face with it, you don't know what it is. So I think we need to unshroud it.
Yeah.
I think we just need to put it in the face of everybody, just to see how gruesome it is and the thinking behind it, and then ask ourselves questions as a community. Do you want to be associated with such a practice in this year, 2022?
This century.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So quite informative for me as well. And I want to thank you.
Thank you.
I think I still have so many questions. Like, we really need to keep talking about this. And clearly it has elicited a lot of discussion online about definitely the rights of the girl child and those things that the girl child is faced with. So is there hope for the girl child? Are you seeing us getting there? Soon?
I'm foreseeing a situation. Actually, the tables will soon turn. The next time you'll be hosting us, you'll be asking us about the boy child. So it's really moving because of the efforts that are being put in place. Yes.
Yeah. I think the girl child is actually getting there, right?
I think we still have a long way to go. But we definitely have made some progress.
We made progress.
We've made some progress.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so much for coming to the show. Like I said, an hour plus is gone.
Maybe before you end the show, there's an issue that Judy had raised on the issue of the sexual offences, the Court of Appeal decision. We've already filed a notice of appeal. In the matter, we filed a notice of appeal. We will, in the course of either today or next week, we'll be filing an application for leave to appeal that decision to the Supreme Court.
Which decision do you know?
The mandatory nature of the Sexual Offences Act.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Sawa. I have to ask this because atamimi nikama. So anyway, thank you so much, Judy, for coming to the show. Like I told Ondimu, this is round one. We'll definitely invite you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
So much to talk about in this space. Ondimu, round one.
Oh, thank you so much for, actually this is my second time to appear in a talk show.
Yeah.
The last time I appeared is when I was being interviewed about the Githurai stripping case, when the guys were convicted.
Yeah.
So this is the second one. I don't know, I don't, it's a bit, it's a coincidence, but it's the second. Thank you so much for that.
So anyway, thank you. And thank you everyone who has been with us on the show. It's quite exciting when people actually ask questions, then we know we are communicating to someone. You know these online things, you feel like someone needs to say hello.
Yeah.
I can hear you, I am there. But we really, really appreciate your engagement. We really appreciate your questions. I hope you got you the answers you want. But you can still ask and somebody definitely will get back to you. Or we can pick it up another time. So this has been the ODPP Cafe Show. We had Duncan Ondimu from ODPP and we had Judy Gitau from Equality Now talking about the girl child, the progress, the challenges, and what the future looks like. There's hope, but we need to do more, according to Judy. And of course, there's the issue of equality and equity. I hope you got it. I can't repeat it. I think I'm going to mess up if I repeat it. But Judy gave it out very well. And of course, Ondimu gave the grim statistics from Narok. I think we just need a prayer day in Narok. But anyway, they are doing what they have to do as justice sector actors. And hopefully we'll get to hear what the outcome of these investigations will be, or their interventions will be. So I want to wish you a good weekend, an actual weekend now. Thursday was weekend before the weekend. So actually wishing you a great weekend, a restful one, and let's catch up in the week to see what we shall be discussing about. So karibu sana, subscribe, engage, and invite a friend to come and learn from the ODPP Cafe. God bless. Yeah.